you know. And that's mostly what we all want, right? Like, what does it take to get better, you know? And I felt like if I keep doing this, I got a long way to go. But if I keep doing this, I will improve, you know. And
Yeah.
then through that, I ended up meeting, and that was a classmate in that class introduced me to somebody that wasn't even in the class, but his name's Jimmy. He became a good friend and a mentor to me, and he taught me about the opportunity, the professional opportunity in Atlanta, and how, you know, there was so much filming out there because of the tax credits, and these are things I didn't even know. Like, I like to think myself as a generally intelligent person, but sometimes I'm just like oblivious to things, and that was something I didn't really even know was going on. But he was like, "Oh yeah, I was auditioning all the time," and you know, so I'm, you know, that kind of like perked my ears up, and then eventually he was just super generous with information, and I was hungry for information, and I relocated with no kind of idea. I'd never even visited Atlanta, and I relocated to Atlanta, and thankfully was able to get an agent, and then started auditioning, you know, smaller parts and whatnot. But and then he ended up booking. He was living in LA. He had moved from Atlanta to LA, and you know, to further his career. But then he booked something that was filming in Atlanta, and he was there for like, I think, like 6 weeks filming this movie. So then when I was getting auditions, he would take me and coach me and like really just yell at me and like try to teach me how to make it at least semi-passable. And then right after his movie finished, he ended up booking a show recurring that was like, he was out there for another couple of months. So really he was able to whip me into shape. I mean, you know, and he's kind of like yeah, his teaching style, he really wants to help, but he's also like a bit of a hard ass. But I learned a lot, man. And thankfully through that tutelage of a guy who actually has been where I want to go, which is has booked gigs, and I've never booked a gig. I learned a few things, and then booked a couple of, you know, booked my first job, small job, and then like booked. It was playing a cop on Dynasty. So at least finally someone had like paid me money to do some acting, and then I went on to the next
What year
job.
was that?
2017. So 2017, my first professional credit, and I moved to LA in 2005. So like around, I probably met
Wow.
you in 2006 ish. So yeah, all that time, zero credits. And then finally 2017, first credit. And then like 6 months later, next credit. And it kind of built from there. And then eventually in 2019, I booked a series regular on the Tyler Perry show, Bruh, which was a big time life changer, game changer, you know, for that opportunity. And then
It's
um,
amazing.
yeah, so that was kind of, you know, and then obviously since then I booked a couple of things, and we did 4 seasons on the show, and that's the version, man. So
Dude, that's a great version. How was it? What did you do? What kind of audition was the Tyler Perry show? And how many times you have to be called back? Was it just a few times, or how did it go? Did you meet
so
with him?
that was a really dope experience. So I had the audition, the first audition, and I went to that was in person at Tyler Perry Studios. So Raven Drummer's the casting director in Atlanta, and she has an office there. So it was in the office. Now there were four lead dudes on the show, and I got the opportunity to audition for three of the four leads. So I was like, wow, they're really trying to give me a chance. This is awesome. And did the audition in person, just, you know, with the casting director, and moved on. That was cool. And then I got notification, hey, they want to call you back for this Tyler Perry show. And I'm like, stoked, yes. I'm like, when is it? You know, and they're like, we're not sure, but they're going to fly you to LA for the callback with Tyler Perry himself. And I'm like,
Wow.
whoa, this is amazing. So I'm excited, obviously, right? Bigger opportunity I've ever had. And then they flew us into LA, and us meaning like there was a handful of other actors that were booked that got the call back from Atlanta, but most of them were like out of LA. So you know, in LA, they just drove from their houses or whatever. So there's a ton of people at the callback. You know, I was like mad nervous. I was like so nervous. It was like, you know, I remember being in the waiting room and just like, why am I like sweating so much? You know what I mean? Like going into the bathroom, put a little paper towel, like didn't want to like, because I was wearing like I was wearing like some type of button-up shirt. I didn't want to like embarrass myself with the wet spots and all that. So I was, whatever, the nerves were kicking in. But I felt I'd worked on it, at the time I didn't even know. Well, before I flew in, I didn't know which part it was. Eventually, obviously, they told me it's for this specific part. So, part by the name of Bill. So Bill was like playing an architect on the show and whatever. So I went in, auditioned for that, and there was like it was one of those callbacks where they do that thing where it's like when you're done in the room, you don't necessarily leave. You go back in the waiting room and don't leave until we dismiss you. And if we dismiss you, it doesn't necessarily mean you didn't book. And if we keep you, it doesn't necessarily mean you booked.
Wow.
But we all know, like, if you get sent home, it's like the kiss of death, So I go out there and I'm just like waiting. And then somebody says, okay, you can leave. And I'm like, okay. Like on the outside, I act like it was no big deal. But on the inside, I'm like devastated, like, So I'm walking out and it's in a hotel. So it's like a hotel. One of the ballrooms is the waiting room. One of the ballrooms is like the audition room. So now I'm walking back up, but I see some guys that I'd kind of like known or talked to in the waiting room. So I'm like chopping it up with them, like trying to be cool, even though inside I'm like dying. And as I'm out there, the casting assistants run over like, "Hey, you're Mahdi?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Oh no, you're not supposed to leave yet. Just I'm sorry." And I was like,
Whoa.
"Okay, cool." So I played it cool. I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's cool." On the inside, I'm like, "Yes," So got to stick around. And then they brought us back in the room, but like a chemistry thing. They were kind of like, you two stand next to each other, you four stand next to. I guess they wanted to see like, do we look like we could be friends? Because it's like about four friends, and all that was happening. So I'm like, well, and then they dismissed us all at the same time. So I was in for the long haul. So I'm thinking, what about as good as it can go? Because nobody actually booked out of this, but I made it to the final, whatever. Like I'm feeling good. Fly back to Atlanta and
Wow.
waiting around. So then like I get the call a couple days later, you're pinned for the role. So I'm like, okay, this is good. And then, or which, means you're in the final selections for those who aren't familiar with the term. And then I wait like a week. So I'm thinking I'll know by Friday for sure. Friday came and went, hadn't heard anything, and it's like,